Okay, hey there. My name is Ron Felton, with a broker and owner with Aurea Realty in Amador County, more specifically Pioneer, California, where we like to watch deer, and we like to watch sunsets, and we like to watch our money. So I've been seeing all this stuff going around Instagram, Facebook. Basically, we're not memes anymore. We're sending out like these infographics, these 4-point bulletin infographics explaining what's happening to the market or what could be happening to the market, which is hilarious because I actually have been in the real estate industry for almost 30 years. I am not an economist in any kind of way. I didn't graduate from college because I didn't even graduate from high school, but I have lived through a couple of recessions and what everyone likes to call a depression, with the foreclosure market of 2007 to 12 or whatever, and the middle of it being 9. And so I was in the real estate industry for 30 years, some way or the other. And so I do understand that our grandparents went through it, and our parents probably went through it, and kids are going to probably go through it because the economy goes up and down. So the last thing you want to do is start freaking out, panicking over everything. And in an age where we have all this culture of just fast, and it's probably not really good in that culture to be doing that. So the best way for you to get information is from people that are qualified. And that doesn't mean me, because if you're listening to me, you're already, no, I'm just kidding. But anyways, there are people that can explain stuff and there's people that can't. And there's people that have lived through stuff and there's people that haven't. Half of the population today, just by numbers, almost half the population hasn't even experienced an economic downturn. We've been in upturn, but the scaling upward, what we would call incline, inflation, 12 years, 10, 12 years, we've been trending upward. That means that if you're 30, then you weren't even 18 when the last time that there was any economy that went backwards. And so that also means that if you're in the industry and you're a professional and you're under the age of 30, you probably have never experienced it. You've only known the good times. And that could be frightening. And it could be scary because you're going to have this like shift that's going to happen, and it's not the same as what you're used to. Everything's been like, buyers against buyers trying to win a house. Well, it's going to be sellers against sellers trying to sell a house, and it's going to be way different. But it's not going to be like some crazy thing that's not happened before. It's not even going to be like it was in the foreclosure market. What I do know about real estate is that it's like the weather. It's easy to forecast when it's hot and it's cold. But when it's changing and it's going from one to the other, nobody knows what's going to happen. Yeah, you know it's going from hot to cold. Yeah, we know that. But do you know how it's going to happen and what's going to happen? It changes on so many variables that how far it goes and what happens is sometimes a trend created by just the forecaster alone can create that trend. And so when we process all the information as professionals, it's when we're in the field, it's important to talk to people. And especially like if you have listings in that trend that starts to change, why the comps are still holding, you shouldn't be letting sellers get rid of their equity just by lowering the prices on their houses. Because if it's the rate drop that's happening, and we'll talk about that, then you should be asking sellers to take that money and buy down the rate for the buyer and put it back in the reserves. And you'll all understand all that in a minute if you're not in the real estate industry. If you are in the real estate industry, you know exactly what I'm talking about. This video is made for people that can, there's no way somebody in a 4 bullet point infographic that says, they got too much skin in the game, they're not going to bail out. Nobody even knows what those terms mean. And if they do, they really don't understand how it gets that way. And so I'm going to break it down real quick. It's only going to take about 3 hours, no, I'm just kidding. I'm gonna try to do it in like 20 minutes, and maybe it takes a couple times to post it or whatever, because I don't know how all that stuff works. I know you can make a YouTube video, but I'm gonna try to get it on Instagram and Facebook or whatever. And so, if you are young and you are in the real estate industry, or you're watching this and you're in a place where you can listen, okay, this is your opportunity. Don't blow it. Don't blow it. If you're young, don't blow it. You gotta listen. And I'm gonna show you why. Do not mess this up. Now I'm gonna go over some of these words along the way. I'm sure we're gonna tap on them. I'm gonna take them off. You've had time to see them up there. You can always go back later and look at them, and we'll tie them in together. But I'm gonna put a couple more words up here. And these are little things that we keep hearing. This is skin in the game. Skin in the game. They're not gonna bail out. Maybe they will, because they're upside down. Probably a word I should have put over here was liquid. I missed this one. These are all terms that I think you would see professionally more, but these are ones that you see professionally, but they're just terms, phrases we use for stuff. I'll try to put more up there if I remember them and you've heard them. So I'm going to set them down here. I'm going to get rid of this. I'm going to make sure that all this is still working. Cool. Someone wants to record for 20 minutes and they find out they've screwed up. Technology. I feel better when people are sitting right here, because I can look at their faces and I can get a response immediately, and it's groovy, and I don't need to, this is not rehearsed. I know what's going on in my head, and I think I could spill it out pretty quick, but I don't know how long it's going to take, because I've never spilled it out in all this form, or I don't even know where I'm going to go sometimes. But real quick, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a graph. This graph is what you see. Ta-da! Guess what? Now I'm an economist, right? Here, I'll even make it like more. I'll clean this up, not be so stupid. We'll do that because that happened for a while. We'll just leave it like that. It doesn't really matter. You'll get the gist of it. Now, every one of these little spots in here somewhere means something. It probably fits into some nomenclature somewhere on this chart. Matter of fact, if I did it a little different, some of them would fit even better. If I did things like well, even what's going to happen now, you know, it would just happen, you know, like it goes down sharply, okay? And it goes up sharply sometimes, right? So this is a little place right here where everything goes different. And this is a little place right here where everything goes different. These are called transitions and peaks and valleys and whatever you want to call them. But this is a transition in the market, or shift is what we like to call it, because that's proper terminology, okay? So this is a shift in the market. Now, a shift doesn't necessarily mean it's going up and down all the time. Shift can just be from going like upward. Gosh, I hope you can still hear me really well. It could be from going upward to going just at a different rate in the same direction, okay? And so when it's going in the same direction like this, but at a different rate, it's actually just decelerating. So we have acceleration and we have this deceleration. Now, when we have so much deceleration, we have what's called a declination, or we have a recession. So something is going to go back down, okay? And this is when it no longer can go up any further, but it doesn't necessarily mean it went further down than some crazy thing, you know, from 20 years ago. Normally, when there's a shift in the market and it's over a certain amount of time, That's how they dictate it. It's usually done by quarters. I think it's 2 quarters in a row that are dropping, then we're in a downward trend, obviously. So if we have 2 quarters in a row that are rising, we're in an upward trend. And how fast we go up and how fast we go down is still considered an accelerated market. So for instance, if we drop really fast in the market, well, we accelerated. Even though we decelerated and we put the brakes on, when we drop fast, we decelerate, we accelerate. I mean, that's what happens when we drop fast. It goes in a faster form. So even though we're going down, we're still accelerating. When we're going up and we're decelerating, sometimes we're still going up. We're just not going up as fast. And sometimes when we're going really fast down, accelerating downward, we decelerate and we start to trend out. So we have to be careful how we use words and how that's pictured in our mind. So this is crazy. Like no one in the right freaking mind could ever figure out what I just said. I mean, it's complicated. People do. We figure it out. We have to. Anybody who's in financing or real estate or, does it probably took some schooling of some sort. I don't know because I never did, so I don't know what people learn. I just know that it wasn't taught to me in any kind of basic form, and I've been around real estate for a while, and it's still complicated, and it certainly is not going to get solved by in 2 minutes. It will not get solved by 2 minutes. If you don't put some time into this and think about this, you will blow it. I don't care if you're buying a house or you want to buy a house or you're in the real estate industry. If you don't take time to understand this, you will blow it. Now, this is what I do know about life, because I've been through life. What I do know about life is there is no opportunity in the land of opportunity. There is no opportunity up here. It is not available. I don't care what anybody thinks. Generally, there is very little opportunity on the way up to there. The reason being is, and this may come off as being I don't know. It's you can classify. That's what you're going to have to do to understand this. We're going to have to classify. We have people that don't have as much money. You can call them whatever you want. They're poor. That's what typically we call them. And then we have people that are in the middle. What do we call those people? The middle class. And I don't care where we travel and where we put poor people and where we put the diamonds, the rich people, the middle class will always be in between. Now, this class of person on the way on an upward trend, all they have to do is stay healthy. Meaning they just have to keep their finances in order and stay healthy. If they stay healthy and they will stay in front of you. Because this is what I learned in life. You cannot wish yourself rich. No matter how much you try, you cannot just turn yourself rich by desire alone. There has to be something else involved. And you cannot make yourself unpoor by desire alone. If you're poor, it is very hard to become not poor. And if you are not rich, it is very hard to become rich. So, in this trend, when we're moving upward, poor people have no choice but to be towed along by the middle class. That's a fact. God bless the middle class, working, home ownership, get up and go to work, do your part to keep America strong. I know that sounds like some kind of political rant, but truth be told, in economy, and that's what we're looking for, is to keep our economy strong, because that's what we see floating around, and it's taking up our space, our air, and we're freaking out, but don't, because this is where opportunity exists for all men, all women, all people in America, because that's our format of how we judge and how we go up and down. So what happens in this process is the rich are not going to go down here and get the poor and bring them up around you. It's impossible, because there still has to be middle class. So it's not going to happen. Never going to happen. Okay? They're going to stay in front. They've got to stay healthy. Now some people will be will screw up and become poor in this process, and some people will become rich, and but it ain't from wishing, okay? It could be from inheritance or something, so whatever, it could happen strangely. But what happens is when we get to the top of this peak, okay? Now, you might think, oh my gosh, we're all equal at the top of this peak. Of course we are, because the rich guy is up here, and the middle class guy is up here, and the poor guy got up here. But keep in mind, the rich guy got up there first, okay? And if you ever noticed, at the top, there is not very much room. I'm sure you've heard that. There's only room for one at the top. Okay, well, that's true. And the rich get to the top, and all they have to do is stay there. The middle class get there, and they can't get near the top. And the poor are just hanging on to the middle class. And then the market trend drops. And what happens when that market trend drops? Well, guess what? The first ones down the road are the poor people. That's what happens. The market's falling. But guess what? It gets crazy in here, because this is where it gets all mixed up. And I tell you, when it gets to right here, it's anybody's game, because poor people will be equal to rich people in a lot of regards in this area, because not all the rich people are going to make it, and not all the poor people are going to. You can't get. You're poor. What's going to happen? You made it. You still made it. You're poor. You're here. This is where the opportunity exists for anybody who's not rich. It exists for the rich as well. So be careful and don't blow it. I keep saying that. Don't blow it. This is when it happens. It has to happen. You want it to happen. You just have to be smart about how it happens. We have to protect our economy in the process of inflation. When our dollar starts to change and it becomes worth less, we don't want it to become worthless. And so what happens when it transitions, we have to be prepared for it. Now, if you're prepared for it, you can go all the way to the top with this dude if you want. That's fine. That's great. And while he's up there hanging out, you could be ahead of him over here. You could just decide, like, we're just going to go over here and wait and not exhaust ourselves. This is in the form of people paying above appraisal prices. So when people were fighting over houses, they were paying $20,000, $30,000 out of their savings account above and beyond what they could borrow, but they were borrowing at such a low rate they didn't care. So at 3%, you put in an extra $30,000. It doesn't matter. It transfers over to be a crazy good payment, so you don't care. A lot of your equity is still going into your house, and that came out of your savings. That was, by the way, the savings that you got over the last 10 years when the market was doing well. That was for you to hold on to, not necessarily dump into over and above an appraisal value, which is no better for the market than a decrease in it, honestly. And we didn't really tighten down on that very well, but we tend to be decades away still from educating ourselves in real estate, even though it's been around for 10 decades already, over that 150 years. And so what happens in this market is, if you gave up 30 grand and a house went to here above appraisal value, when it comes back down to here, you would still have your $30,000. And in that process, you would have that $30,000 to operate with. So your equity in your house would be larger. And this is what I mean by this is an opportunity right now. Not, oh my gosh, this is getting crazy. A seller could take his equity that he has in the house, instead of pitting himself against other sellers, and pit himself against the rate, and pit himself against the lender and buy down the rate instead of dropping his house 30 grand. And in the meantime, you can also put 30 grand that you didn't put down because you didn't never get a house in that market. You can wait. The market will fix itself. This is not a bad thing. This is where the market has to go back to, because people were paying above and beyond, and when they pay above and beyond, it gets comped to that. That's where our values start going up. And so what happens when it comes back down to here, then of course we have the ability to go back even lower with that money that we didn't put out in our savings, and then we can buy down the rate even more. But I mean, you can't buy down the rate to nothing, because they don't want that. They got to make money. If you have that much money, you can just go find somebody else to loan you money. A shark. So anyways, all that is pretty self-explanatory. I mean, the average person can remember that for as long as I showed them this, and explain it to them. But the minute you leave, that is not going to be able to sink into you, because it's all just, what did he say? You know, he just showed me and I get it. Yeah, and the market's going to go down and this is a shift and a transition, and, you know, like all this stuff's happening, equity, reserves, you know, value. Holy cow. If you don't understand this, I mean, you're the smartest generation to come around in history. If you don't understand this, and we've been doing it for 150 years, we are honestly in the shits, okay? And so this, we're going to get rid of this. I use my oldest billboard, whiteboard for this, because it's almost as outdated as this whiteboard, that technology. Now, I hope this sinks in, because this really helps me. And in my brain, I came to this conclusion with all these words we use and everything. I just started a long time ago picturing the housing market and our economy more like how they always frame it, like with liquids and air and, you know, area and mass. And when I did that, it allowed me to really understand how these variables can get, you know, into the market, into the real estate market, and how they affect them. Now, along the way, I started thinking, well, how can I explain to somebody else, you know, like this kind of stuff? Because I do like to explain it. If somebody, and obviously if I'm a broker, I need to try to explain it to people. Last thing I need is clients that are broke. I want them to prosper so they can buy more houses. Praise the Lord. And so anyways, what you do is, you gotta figure out how to build that up in your mind if you don't understand all this rigmarole about graphs and what that means, because honestly, you can't see all the variables in there. It's just a shift and a transition, and unless the guy stands there and shows you how to swing over from peak to peak, you're never gonna, not even with God's help, you're not gonna figure that out, man. Maybe with the devil's, because it's almost that crazy. So anyways, this is gonna sound so crazy, but it's bathtub economics, and it's just so crazy to even think of. But we all have experienced a bathtub. We understand the functionality of it. We understand what happens in it. We understand what all the every profile of the bathtub. Almost every person in the United States, from the time they are 5 till the time they are gone, is exposed to some form of a bath. Now, as crazy as that sounds, a lot of this stuff equates to our bathtub experiences. And when we start thinking about all that, we can really place it. Now, the one thing that I do have it on here. Okay, so right down here we have the word index. Now this word, I'm going to try to check these off, I think, as I go along, to see, because I've never even tested this theory against a whiteboard in an audience. If you're an audience, you're my phone. You're not even my audience. And so what happens is the index is, it's kind of our bathtub. If you want to picture the housing market as our bathtub, so the market and the index, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to draw, just bear with me, you saw how I just touched the board and I don't even really draw anything, and I don't even know if that helps you, and hopefully you don't berate me on social media for trying to help people. That's the most awful thing. Just don't watch it and move on. And if I offend you, then I'm sorry up front. You can tell me how I offended you and I'll apologize again, and then we can move on. But if I'm wrong, just whatever. Don't devaluate me. Try to help people. So we're going to just make this a bathtub. Enough with my rant. This, if you remember, your bathtub, unless you're way back where it was just a tub, it has a drain. Okay? Now, along with the drain, it has a spout. Right? Let me do that over here. Now, it also has this little thing over here. This is like an overflow. It goes also to the drain. We all know that. It's not just going under the house. It's going to the same place as the drain. It's not having the same effect, obviously, because if it's going out the top, you can't bathe with it. Now, that's your basic setup for a bathtub, right? Inside of these areas of this bathtub, we have our current market, if you want to say that. The share of what we would call the real estate industry or the market that supports the basic, it really is the glue and the fabric that holds our economy together. Truthfully, it's not going out and going to the movies as many times as you can on a stimulus check, because a stimulus check only does one house payment. There's no freaking way that could be solving any problems. It's from people grinding it out, making house payments, putting that money back into the economy, and creating a place for them to experience life safely. And we keep getting caught up in value of that, and I don't know what that is. My motto for my real estate company is to live where you play, so I clearly don't care how much money you have. It's way more important to park yourself somewhere where you're going to have fun and hopefully you can make a living. And so what happens inside of this market, we call this a community. And inside of this community, it's generally built up by a population that's based out of a central part of the economy. And so what happens is, in this bathtub, and because of where I live, I would venture to say, because I don't really pay too close of attention, because you could break it down all the way to your neighborhood and get demographic of your neighborhood and see what values are and all that kind of stuff. That's a comparable that we would do for somebody selling a house. But we could also just judge it against America. Well, that's not very accurate, because, a quart of milk costs different here than it does there in Alaska and everywhere, so a house does too. And so people have different jobs, and huge parts of the country go broke at times because of factories or whatever, and there's all kinds of fires can wipe out a whole community. There's so many economic shifts that could happen that aren't just based on what's going on in America, that we can't really use those trends all the time. So what we do is we draw it around a central part of the economy. And so we try to get that area as close as we can to how we might be experiencing life for that area. And that if we started somewhere in a very small community and we drew that circle out, and we might only touch a little bit on a large community. So we don't do that. That's obviously not how we're going to draw a demographic, or we're not going to relate to a trend or an index or a community. What happens is we draw it in a certain size, usually in a size that is retained in some kind of way. Like it can't experience some massive overgrowth. It can be contained and managed in some kind of way. And that's generally how we kind of deal with communities and how we deal with markets, okay? Just so people understand now what a market is. That's what a market is. And in any given market, there's a certain number of homes in that community. And so that part of that market plays a share in the value overall of those homes. And something far away can't necessarily affect the value of your home. Now, it can if it's an economic condition, obviously. It can affect your home greatly, collectively, across a greater region. But let's just go to our area for now. And we're going to say, like, Sacramento's our area. And if we drew a broader circle of Sacramento, this would be our region, our community, our market. So this tub, I want you to now picture in your mind this bathtub. You're looking down on Google Earth. You see Sacramento. You see that metropolitan area. You see how big it is. I don't care where you look on a map. You see that happening. When you see that growing out, that's the index. Those homes are the index. Okay, all those homes collectively are the index of what could be sold at any time, or on the what we would call available market, because these are off market when they're not out there ready for sale. And then they could also just get, like, who knows, tragic things can happen, like floods and fires and whatever. So that can also wipe out an index. And then also homes can be added to the index, obviously, if we build them. And so this is taking a while, but we're getting there, okay? So now you have this region and this community. Now, inside of that community, you have homes. We mentioned that, and that's what makes up the index. Now, inside of there, and I'm just going to do maybe one one home, or several, but in different forms. And hopefully this makes sense too. Now, let's just go back to the bathtub. We're never going to move away from this process of being in the bathtub because it makes so much flipping sense that you're going to have rocks, pebbles, whatever you play with in the bathtub. I know it sounds weird, but kids do it. So you have rocks, okay? And then I should have made this rock a different color, but whatever. It's all good. Then you have sponges, okay, in the bathtub. And hopefully I can do this right. I've never even practiced this before, so bear with me. Have mercy on me. Okay. And then also in the bathtub, you have, I wish I had yellow. But anyways, these are going to be your floaty toys, okay? I don't even know how to make a floaty toy. I'll just make it like I'll just make it a ball. I'll make a little, oh, that's just awful. I was going to try to make a duck real quick, but that's just dumb. Let's go back to basics. Just make a ball. Okay, now, that's your tub, right? These are your basic toys in there. I mean, it's still a tub. This is, we got it going on, man. Now, this is obviously your water level, right? I should move this a little bit. Screw that up a tiny bit, but accuracy is important in real estate and when you're drawing tubs. Okay, so there you go. I'm gonna check this video because I never know if it's playing still. Okay, or recording. So now, it's pretty defined still, right? Matter of fact, we're gonna just do one little dinky, one little dinky drop here. So now you're getting it, right? But this is not real estate. This is just a bathtub full of toys. But it is really real estate. And I'm gonna show you how. These rocks right here, these rocks have major displacement in the market, okay? And the reason being is because they have the most weight, okay? Ha! Now we're starting to use all these little acronyms. These rocks have more skin in the game, okay? The reason they have more skin in the game is because they own more equity in their home. Man, I should start blasting these off. Equity, skin in the game. Okay? Now, how do they have more equity in their home? They have more equity in their home because equity is not a value. Equity is equal to something. Equity equals a percentage of the market, believe it or not. And if the market shifts in any direction, you lose a percentage of your equity. So it's equal to something. It equates to something. And it's a simple word, but we don't really understand how we use it and where it falls into place with everything else. So if you have equity in your home, you have weight in your home. Now, if all the homes in America were owned by rocks, meaning that people didn't have loans, they had all equity, and everything in their home was equity, then this area that we're filling up here, obviously, would be filled up with many rocks. Right? And as a result of that, obviously, we have the displacement that keeps our homes at a certain value. And as we put rocks in that area, the value, the level of the water goes up in that tub. And as a result, the values of our home go up. No, that's not necessarily true. They're not, the equity can displace this water and we could lose it too at the same time if the equity in our homes is not accurate. If it's inflated equity, and holy cow, yeah, well, that's inflation, but that's not the same. A bubble is created by an inflated value of a home, making it look like a rock when it's not a rock. It's a rock that could bust and be air inside of it. It could be empty. It could be like one of those crystal things you buy at Knott's Berry Farms. You get duped, crack it open, there's nothing inside. And so what happens as these rocks form up, they tend to create wealth in our economy, but they also can create disturbance in the economy. And we'll show you that part in a second, because it's better to take this one more step and show you what the sponge does in our economy. Now, what the sponge does in our economy is the sponge usually has some weight. It has some rock in it, okay? They've got some skin in the game. They have part of their money in their house. That's the equity. Everybody who's in the market who owns a house is at least at the bottom of the market has that much equity, right? Because even if the market crashes down to nothing, everybody at the bottom of the market will still own a house and they'll have that much equity. It'll be equal equity and it'll be crap, but it'll all be the same. They will still have weight in the market. Now, what happens is this sponge obviously is not like the rock. It doesn't displace the values the same way inside of our economy, inside of our given area. So how this sponge works is it actually has the value in it. Interesting, because our value is this water out here, and the sponge has the value in it. And I want to show you how this sponge has value in it. If you try to take this sponge out of this tub right now, and it has weight in it, it will be difficult. You will have to pick it up, and as you're taking it out, it will lose some of its residual moisture. But I guarantee you, if it's a good sponge, and it's a solid sponge, the same as a good mortgage, when you try to pull that thing out and squeeze it, you ain't gonna get much out of it, because it's what's holding the economy together. And if you try to pull that thing out and get rid of it, and it's holding the economy together, it's impossible to have such a shift in the market when there's weight and the sponge holds the value. Okay? Now, what happens when you buy something that is at the top end of where the market allows, where that share is, what happens at that point is the top end of the value of your home, you got the bottom end that has weight, and the middle, which is the meat and potatoes holding the economy together, and in the middle, you have your ball right here. And I'm going to redraw this. I think I'm going to do this green a little higher just to make it kind of fit in better. I think what we do is bring this green up to here. And what happens at the top of this is that is the part that's obviously in question all the time. And not only that, but at any moment, if we don't train ourselves well and we don't pay attention, at any moment, any part of this equation can become underneath, above water, and will be all those terms you hear, upside down, head above water. Every one of them has to do with drowning or dying. So what happens is this can become, if this level drops or we push too much of it out, then there can be some effects on that. And so once again, what we need to do is we need to go back to being in the bathtub, because here we are. You got solid rocks in the bathtub. They've got a lot of displacement, but they're dangerous because when you take them out, they drop the water really fast. So if everybody with the rock took off and went out of the market right now, would it affect the market and make the market crash because the values would go down? Well, not necessarily. I'm going to tell you why. Because those people just don't move out of their houses. They have to buy another house. Unless they own a second home or they got transplanted because of some kind of occurrence or something or other. But also houses enter the market all the time too for a bunch of reasons. People pass on and people sell their second homes and people build homes and all kinds of reasons. And so what happens is that the houses with the most equity no house, by the way, let's do this real quick. No house affects the market necessarily when it goes out on the market. It affects the buyer's market and it affects the seller's market, but it doesn't necessarily affect values, okay? And I'm going to explain to you why. How values are affected is when homes return back into the index. When they go out to a market, a marketable market, because this is still the market, it's just off market or on the market. So when they go onto the market, they go onto the market with a certain size. So this rock is a certain size when it goes onto the market. Now, in an upward trend, what would happen is, obviously, in an upward trend, what happens is you take the rock out and put it on the market, right? And when you take the rock out onto the market, and when you bring the rock back, the rock is bigger. So now this rock takes up more space, which causes the volume of the value, the water, causes values to go up because the rock came back in larger than it went out. So real estate does not work the way people think. And it does in a way. If there's millions of homes on the market at once, well, that can affect the market greatly, because if people have that much weight in the market, if they're all rocks and they all go out in the market at once, well, then they're going to be fighting against each other to sell their houses. That's just dumb. That destroys the economy. Nobody should do that to themselves ever. And they can only, pardon me, ever. And they can only do that so much before they don't have any value left in their home, so they're not going to do that anyways. You know, the only reason people would do that is if, like back in the foreclosure market, you know, when there's just nothing left. And so we'll talk about that in a second too, because we need to really get to that, because that's what people are talking about, and it's ridiculous. There's not even anywhere near close to what could happen back then till now, and it's just pathetically generous to even place yourself in that position after what we went through. It's super offensive to hear somebody even claim that they're going to go through this experience like the people went through in 2007 to 12, because it was absolutely ridiculous. And unless you put eyes on it and touched it and saw what happened, I would not live through that to happen again. I would not want that to replicate. So I think the people in the industry are going to put that in check. So what's going to happen is we're going to have a downturn in our economy. Now, how does that happen? Let me tell you how that happens. Because the first thing we do when we get inside of a bathtub, and not all of us do this, but a good portion of us, because you know why? Because it's fun to pop bubbles, right? That's what that commercial says with the plastic wrap. We like popping bubbles. When we get in this bathtub, we get a little soap on our bottom, and we go back and forth and back and forth. You like that? That's fun, huh? And we enjoy it. It's a blast. We get that water. Man, there's some of us that don't do it. We already know its consequences are going to be grave. And there's some of us that gotta do it, and we gotta find that line, man. We gotta find out. If we can bring that water up the air, you know, woohoo! Yeah, we almost could see the bottom down here. That's how bad we do it sometimes, man. We get the water going in one direction. Matter of fact, some of us, we let water go over the side, and that's the checks and balances that we're supposed to have. When that water gets to the point where it's starting to go, this drain can't even keep up anymore with the residuals, and it starts to go over the edge. That's when your mom comes in and whoops your ass for ruining the house, okay? That's what you're getting ready to do, is you're getting ready to ruin the house. You play around too much, you're going to ruin the house. You're going to get water out of the tub, it's going to ruin the house. It's going to ruin the housing market, it's going to ruin the house. It's the same effect. What happens is, when we keep pumping, whoop, am I blue here? Yeah, whatever. If we keep pumping water, and keep pumping water in here at a rate. Now, this is the market, okay? This pumping into the market, this is what we call, believe it or not, this is the reserves, okay? The bank only has so much money that they can loan you, and it's based on savings accounts. Now, conventional loans come from other places, and they can put money at risk differently, but there's federal laws to protect your funds that go into like insurance accounts and stuff like that. They also have to keep reserves too, in case everybody dies at once and they have to pay out the life insurance policy. So there are federal programs for insurance companies and things like that, but there's investors and there's all kinds of stuff, right? So there's other ways to get money, but basically it all comes from these reserves. And there are only so many reserves. And so what happens as this market, we start to flood this market with these reserves, right? And we're adding equity and value into our homes, and I'm gonna show you why. Because there's ways that we can allow these reserves to enter the market. We can just allow them to be uninhibited, very clean and pure, the purest of water that there is. That would be like free money, right? If I just loaned you free money, every payment you made would be based in equity. That means it equates to something in the market at the time, because if you sold your house at that moment, who knows what it would be? You have to equate it to that. So as you're paying along, you're getting growth. And that doesn't mean if you paid $1,000, you're going to get $1,000, because it's equity. It amounts to whatever the value is at that time when you sell your house. And so as this stuff is falling into the tub, is it clean? No, it's got impurities in it. There's things attached to that. It's called interest rates. Interest rates can go up and down. Property mortgage insurance, it's a percentage of your loan. There's taxes, there's insurance, there's everything else that goes inside of here. Those things are attached to that, and those things don't necessarily make it into the weight of your home. And as a result of that, those are called residuals. They still fill up the values. They still kind of pump up the values, but it's people getting a piece of the pie. In a normal market, that's fine. It's taken care of. In a normal market, in an everyday market, people can foreclose, people's houses can burn down, people can die and lose their houses. Everything can happen like that. You can get heir to house. It all is pretty much, it's little waves in the tub, so it's not that big of a deal. But what happens is, the more impurities there are in that, then obviously the less weight you have in the reserve. Well, the reserves are still the same amount, but the less weight you have in your payment every month, because part of it, a bigger portion is going away to pay the interest rate. So what happens is, as you put this money in here, the values of homes aren't necessarily rising. They only rise because people fight over the home and they pay more for the home, and when it comes back, it's a bigger amount. That is how prices go up. It's not made by it's made indirectly from the interest rate, because you can pay more out of your payment and less is going to whatever loan procedure you're going through. As a result of that, you're going to be paying more on the basis of your home quicker. So you could buy a bigger house for more money and actually be paying less, because you're going to pay more on the front end instead of on the back end, because nobody sees their loans to 30-year fruition most of the time. Some people do, but you'll never see that. So if you have the money to pay up front, you should. You've heard people say that before. Always make your double payments and pay more up front, because that goes right directly to your, oh shoot, there's a word I left off there. I can't even believe that. Principal, okay? Here I went all this time and I just used that word. That's so crazy. So the biggest share of this raindrop that goes towards your house and not out the drain as residuals is called principal. That's the most amount you can give to your house. Okay, so the impurities in the water. I don't want to get tied up in those words, because when we get tied up in those words too much, then you lose focus on what I'm trying to teach you here. And this is about how we can balance out markets and how we can understand them. So at the same time people are entering the market, obviously there's people exiting the market. If we didn't have that kind of strategy, what would happen is people would just keep entering the market, and there'd be no homes for them to buy, and the homes would skyrocket, and it would just be even more tragic than it is right now for people that want to try to buy homes on a basic income. It'd be just ridiculous. It would be no good for any of us. We don't want an equal economy, and we don't want a lopsided economy. What we want is people that all have value in the economy one way or the other. That's an important part of this procedure. Is like we want people with solid equity, and there's going to be unfortunate incidences where people lose their homes and they just have no value. And then there's the people that make up the weight of it with good solid loans. And that's, there's a huge industry involved in that, and our lives are based on it for the most part. And so the people that have the most weight are going to be the most significant in this operation. So now, let's talk about this wave and how we get in trouble. Now, if you notice, this, holy cow, I just drew that to look a lot like our freaking graph, right? When we're in the tub messing around and we're filling it up at the same time, we don't notice the effect of this. Like we're in this trend, right? Now, when can this trend take place? There's a trend that could take place, like over here, right? And this tub could go here. See? These are trends. And the values of our homes will be placed in there somewhere, okay? Now, these trends are quick most of the time. We don't even notice them. I could show you that other thing, but those are just like little shifts in the market and stuff like that. The problem is when we go up in an upward shift like this, and we go on an upward trend for too long, and we get real close to the drain right here, remember I said that things accelerate and decelerate. In an upward trend, what happens is this starts to decelerate because it's losing ground as it's going out the drain. And at the same time, people are still entering the market. And as a result, people that enter the market and pay above appraisal values, that their values go down the drain. That's what happens. The people who got late into the game and paid $20,000, $30,000 over the price of what the people were asking for the home were just giving that money to an inflated cost because it wasn't paying off their loan, so it wasn't going back to the meat and potato part of it. It wasn't going back into the reserves. Those people are now free to do what they want with their money, and sometimes they just upgraded to another home, which is great. If they, did it, for whatever reason, it's their money. They can do whatever they want. I'm not criticizing. I'm saying that that's not how the basis of that economy works and how we don't put ourselves in check. Literally, putting $30,000 at the end of a market that you know is going to start collapsing and not slowing down is like a fool's errand, because what happens is that and we tell people this all the time, by the way. Again, I'm not criticizing. We look people in the eyes and say, you do understand you'll never see this money again, or you might not see it for 30 years. You really won't see it because it can be much more effective in an open market where you can have some play with it, not in a market that's a pinpointed market where this is your only thing you can do with it. And so what happens is if you take this the value of that overpayment above appraisal, that's literally this little bit of bubble that's left in here. But it doesn't show up like that. At first, what it shows like in an upward trend, it doesn't float like that. We're so already into the drain on the residuals that what happens is as people are entering the market, they're getting like the lowest interest rate ever, and they're like, dude, I got 30 grand and I'm gonna get this house. It's the best time ever to buy a house because my payments will never be lower. So even if I wait and I buy it for $30,000 less, I'm gonna have a 1% or 2% higher percentage rate. And they're right, like that is a lot more money that could be going towards the principal of your loan. So in effect, they sell out. They're like, I don't care. I'm going to do it up front now. And that's what happened. The interest rate probably should have been controlled to not get that low, and it should have been bumped a little. I don't know how that, who knows? It's like the Wizard of Oz dude back there, let's see what happens now or whatever, if I only had a brain. And so what you do is you lose a lot of this impurities that are in there, okay, that aren't even built into the system. They're not impurities like interest rates and mortgage. You're putting the impurities in there that are air because you did that. When you put overvalue into a home and paid $30,000 above that as a U.S. citizen, when you put that money in there, you put little bubbles in there because there was no value in there. That was your savings. And as a result, when they got into the water, they didn't even really need to go down the drain because the minute you put it in there, it just aerated and just become flush at that very moment. It really is, it just had an impact on the upper end of the market. That's all it had an impact on. And I'm going to show you why. When this thing starts to settle back down, some of these lines. Your mom comes in, tans your ass, straightens you out, and this line starts to come back. It's going to come back over here. It's going to settle down. It's going to settle down to here. All the residuals are going to be gone. People that have rocks, equity in their home. These people that have equity in their home, it's not a monetary value until they sell their homes, until it can be what they call valuated in some kind of way. That's done by an appraiser in the market when somebody sells their house. There has to be some kind of valuation. Did I put appraisal on there? I've used a lot of these words and I haven't really gone over too much of them. Obviously, a lot of these, this is a plateau. A shift, a transition is the same. Inflation, recession, Acceleration, deceleration, we talked about that. Bubbles, we've gone over almost all these things. Leverage. Okay, leverage in the market is when you own more of your home, you can go in there and reduce the price of your home to sell it faster. That's leverage. Or if your home's really nice and you could sell it for the same price as everybody else and you're going to sell it faster because you have more leverage. So leverage is when you own more of your liquidity, when you can liquidate your home more, and you don't want it. In that situation, you're not liquidating it, you're just giving away your reserves, you're giving away your own reserves, you're just giving them away free to anybody when you lower the value of your own house by doing that. And so you're giving up on all the principal that you created inside of your home. So now, let me go back and check this again. I have no idea how long this thing will even hold out. I did use my other phone that has all kinds of storage. So, we're almost done. We're going to show you why it's not going to happen, and we're going to be out of here, I think. And so what happens is in this market, what goes on is the people that had the most weight in their home, they didn't lose anything really. They just lost their equity. They're not equal anymore. You can see the water's below them, so they're not balancing anything out. They're sticking out above the water, right? And so that's when you could say they've got their head above water. And they do have their head above water because they're unaffected by what's going on right now other than the value of their home. But I can assure you, they're not leaving and going anywhere because they have all this value in their home. So why would a person with that much value in their home leave? Well, they wouldn't. Now, the next person is the person who got loans and even got loans in the last couple of years that were really low interest rates, and also they got the opportunity to put all their savings into it. Fun. They got low interest rates and dumped their entire savings in here, and they lost their savings. But that's gone and it's over. But they have the house and they have weight in the market, and they contain a large amount of it. Now, how much this market value drops is where they are going to come out in this sponge. When they start getting below, this is the wrong pen for this, when they start getting below what they paid in appraisal values. Okay, so if you paid $30,000 over appraisal value, and then now when it gets down to that price where you say it's actually back at the value it should have been, is what we would say at a true market. This is a repair, by the way. This isn't the market. Market does this. It's not a rescission. It's a freaking repair. It's all it is. The market has to fix itself if people are out of control, beating everybody out of a house by paying out of their savings account. Well, not everybody has a savings account, so that's an advantage. And it's just like if you have a really hot credit score, you get a better rating and you can buy better. So if you have a better savings account, the difference is there's no restraint on your savings account. The bank will let you go freestyle on that, man. And if you break your neck, you can break your neck. Well, the bank doesn't do that with their own money. They're like, no, you're going to stay in between the lines and you're going to listen to the coach. And so it's a whole different effect on how your money's spent. And so in this effect of when this money gets to your savings account gets used, it stands above that line, it gets lost. And we tell people that, and it's unfortunate, but it's also an incredibly, I don't know, I guess it's a vital part of how the market, it has to get to a point like that before it can actually transition, unfortunately. There's this weird precipice that has to happen. Now, let's go over this for a second, and then we're going to be out of here. We're going to get rid of this big freaking rock up here, because we talked about homes that go out on the market, and when they come back, and the size of those homes, and whether or not, when they come back onto the market, whether they're rocks or sponges. Whoa, pardon me, holy cow, that's just rude. Let me get a drink. When they enter back into the market, what are they? So, in 2000, prior to 2007, people got involved in different loans. Okay, and I didn't put this stuff on there, and I'm gonna put it on here real quick, and I'm gonna write it on here so it's right here in the front, and you can understand the difference, and then we're gonna be done. Hopefully, anybody who sees this will be done discussing what's gonna happen to our economy now versus then. So back then, people got involved in what was called a VRM, and this is again, I hate to get into these acronyms and all this shit because no one understands this crap, right? It's a variable rate mortgage. And on top of that, because these were huge values on these homes that people had no qualification for buying. They didn't even have the money to meet the standards to buy those homes. That the rate mortgage was very low. So when they first started to buy their homes, it wasn't very low, but it was lower. It may have started at like, I can't even remember what they were then, but I think they were like at 6% or something like that, maybe 5. I think they were at 4 or 5. I'm trying to remember. That's not the point, because they could be anywhere. I mean, if you get just a little tiny bit of poop on your shoe, it still stinks. So I don't care how low they were, and it's where they ended up is the thing. So you're talking about a low mortgage rate, or an introductory mortgage rate is what we would call that. And it's variable. It's going to change. Now, you're already paying an inflated value for a house. It's not even a real value. So as a result of that, you don't have any weight in the house. Now, people that are doing mortgages today, and we're going to explain the difference real quick, is a fixed rate mortgage. This is a more common, smarter mortgage, okay? A fixed rate mortgage. That means that when you start to pay your loan, it is amortized over 30 years by the month, whatever, you get it. It's amortized over 30 months, and it's equal. The only thing that's going to change is your property taxes and your insurance, but your mortgage will remain exactly the same through the life of the loan. And that's because they figured out what your interest rate was going to be, and they added it all up, and they have a calculation for how to make that spread out to where you get more on the back end and they get more on the front end. It's kind of weird how it works, but it's front loaded. And so it's front loaded in their favor because of just the way it's bound. But if your interest rate is lower, then you're going to be paying more in on the front than you would on the other end. Obviously, even if your share is, if it is front loaded, you're still going to be paying more on the front loaded side. So what happens is, in either circumstance, when it starts out, it kind of looks the same. The only difference is, in a fixed rate mortgage, you could pay over value for your home. Let's just say that in this market you paid, we're going to give this just a rating, okay? We're not going to even give it a value. We're going to give this a rating of a 10, okay? And you paid on a fixed rate mortgage a 10 for this house. And then on a variable rate mortgage, you paid a 10 for this house, okay? Now, in a few years, the amount of your payment every month is going to increase, right? But it's still a 10, right? According to the rating of the house. We're not talking about value, it's value, but it could be a $100,000 house, $400,000, it doesn't matter. So we just call it a 10. So if they're both 10 houses when they start, if this one was overvalued to begin with, and your payment increases over time, and this one was valued fairly, and the only reason it was overinflated was because of money out of your pocket by $35K or $30K or $20K, okay? What happens is the price of that home, the valuation of that home is still a 10. When this thing starts to collapse, right? This thing starts to become an 8, 7. This thing never drops below a 10. It can if the market collapses, but it probably won't because there's nowhere for you to go. You can't just run away from your house. Your mortgage, you're comfortable with it. Your mortgage stays the same month after month after month. You're not going to go anywhere. You're comfortable with it. Unless you lose your job or something, that does happen, and that kind of economy can happen, but it's coupled with the foreclosure market and bad loans and all that stuff. That's not happening right now. It can't happen right now. People can lose their jobs and lose their houses and all kinds of stuff, but not because of the collapse of the loan market. And the reason being is because these loans are still solid. This guy is never going to get lower than 3%. He's never going to be paying more principal in his house than he is now. And if he were to get up and say he doesn't want his house like today, I don't care where he's at in this nation, a guy like me will show up with his checkbook and buy his house in it, because only a fool sells a house that he has basis in, that he has skin in the game, if you want to use all this, that he's a rock. When he's a rock, he ain't going to just get rid of his house. What's he going to do? He can't go anywhere. He's going to displace it for another community somewhere. Now, what happens in this market, this is the inflation market of 2000 foreclosure market of inflation, the inflation market of 2007, when the collapse of 2007, what happened is overinflated home values caused the value to rise to a point where it was spilling the banks. There was no mother there to come in and whoop some ass. We know this to be true now. As that was spilling over the banks in the early part, it was starting to spill over as just loss. Now, as it starts to spill over, investors were picking those properties up. Maybe not as cheap as they were going to get them, but they were starting to pick them up. It was giving an opportunity for people that no longer, their houses were just turning upside down. If you can imagine that, they had no more weight in their house, and it started to just collapse. And as the values started to go down, their houses started, the value starts to go down. I can draw it real quick, but you could see it now. We've been here long enough together. You could see the value starts to drop. What happens? You got no more weight. Things start to flip over. That's what we get all upside down in the market, right? You don't have anything left here. Everything's on the other side. And so what happens in that market, that collapse of that market, they had overinflated values. These rocks weren't really rocks. They just looked like it. And so what happened is, as things started to trend and go along, these people started to see their mortgage payments going up. And they started to see people getting houses, renting houses cheaper than they'll ever be able to make a payment. Nicer houses than sometimes they were living in. And they started seeing what was happening to that variable rate mortgage. And guess what happened? Those bubbles popped. They started to explode. And what happens is, at that point, when people leave their houses, okay, so let's say everybody leaves their house at once and all those houses go out on the market. If they're rocks, they go out on the market. Well, at some point they come back. Hopefully they're the same size, maybe a little smaller, maybe bigger, who knows. But if all of these rocks aren't rocks and they go out onto the market at once, that's what happened in the foreclosure market. People were like, screw this, I'm out of here. And they just left. Their payments just skyrocketed, like $3,500 a month. And you were working, like at some transitional job somewhere, for like mediocre wages or whatever, and you've been there for 6 months, right? And so they would loan you that. And way inflated prices, drive-by appraisals, we've heard it all. So what happens is these aren't really rocks. So it's not where they're at in the market, it's how they return back to the market. But they didn't return back to the market. That's the biggest problem. Those houses went out there and nobody bought them. That is what we call liquid. So those houses come back to the market as liquid, and it's lost. It's lost in value because it spills the bank. It comes back so fast that there's nowhere, the market has shrunk and the values have been lost, and it's just all spoils at that point. And that's what happens when the bank has to liquidate. Okay, in order for the bank now to get back on their feet and be able to have reserves to be able to loan money again, there's only a few things they can do. One is they have to take those houses and they have to liquidate them, they have to sell them. How can they sell them? They don't have no one can loan money anymore. It's a collapsed economy. They have to get investors to empty their bank accounts out, and they have to get those guys to buy them first. And that is the biggest part of how that trend starts to happen, is the investors put money back into the economy. Believe it or not, when we go flat broke, the people, just like the people that put above appraisal value into the economy, help the economy. I know it sounds sickening. They just wasted their money, but it's a stimulation to the economy because it puts home values exactly like at the limit of where they could be. The most of what we can afford to pay, and that's, it's the way it's made. It's made to be squeezed. And so the advantage is always going to be to the person who buys a home and hangs on to it, because we've designed this system to work in that favor. And so no matter where you show up into the market, your equity will most likely be evaluated later on in the market as a result of that in the same format. And so you'll be equal to everyone else who entered the market at the same time as you. People who entered late in this game right now, put in appraisal value above appraisal value, they entered late, they'll be the ones that suffer first, right? They're going to lose a little bit of money. Now, the people that got duped into these loans and stuff like this is not the same situation at all. These values are not, the appraisers did not overinflate these values of these homes. They went up and they were adjusted accordingly, and we're going to adjust it backwards, but not at any rate. Now, can the economy collapse some? It can. It absolutely can. it should collapse a little bit, I guess, if you want to see opportunity. We talked about that. In order for young people to have opportunity, and maybe not necessarily for them to have opportunity, that sounds wrong. If you want to catch a hold of the same opportunities that other people saw in the misfortunes of our economy in the years past, yeah, I edited that part up, okay? Because it's happening. You've only seen great economy, and that's fantastic, and people prosper and things happen. But if you want to make a difference and change how your mentality, you have to start planning before the economy drops, so you know at the bottom, and I dare say you get to the bottom first to figure out what's going on over there. Figure out where the bottom's going to be and what you're going to do when it gets there, because it's going to do this thing again, and it's going to, at some point all this water will be over here again. See, like this. And all the values will be back in the homes. And then at that point, the banks will have reserves, and they'll have to pump it back in there, and that'll happen again. And you have to be somewhere in that market if you want to be. I personally have flipped 10 homes in the last 7 years, and the last couple were huge. One of them was a full rebuild. And so what happens in that 10 years, it's insane. Did I make a bunch of money flipping houses? Kind of, okay? But if you're smart, I never used any of my money. I paid points on the money. I paid 10% interest on all the money that I borrowed, and I borrowed a lot. I had a huge line. But what happens is I didn't use it all at once and at the same time. I rolled that money over into projects over the years. And if you're in an upward economy, and you can pay the 10%, because guess what? The economy's moving faster than that. And all you got to do is just keep those houses going. And guess what? Just owning the house for 6 months in an economy like that is enough to gain equity in it. You don't have to do anything. But if you flip it and do something to it, it's amazing. And you can have two of those going on at the same time. It's amazing if you could just get access to money, which in those times they're trying to pour it back into the tank. And you find big money, hard money lenders, big money lenders, banks, all kinds of places you can find money at. And if you get your head in the game as a young person and start understanding where you want to be to pick up that market, man, I'm telling you, this is not that scary thing that all these forecasters are getting ready to tell you. You know what? People in the desert don't believe none of it, because the weather never changes. And so, don't be dried up and worthless. You want to have an idea of you can affect the market by helping people understand the economy so they don't do stupid things in a rush with their homes. And like I said earlier, that even means not allowing somebody to devalue their own home and pit themselves against themselves. They're pitting themselves against themselves so they can sell a house. Pit them against the institution and pay down the points. Help them with their PMI. If you give them back $10,000 directly towards the PMI on that, because you can buy down the PMI sometimes. I mean, that's a huge payment every month. I could go on and on. And man, that's probably been an hour. I'm going to have to break this down into little pieces, and it's probably going to sound stupid when I watch it back, but I hope that if you can picture this tub in our community. One thing I didn't expand on is, when home values go up and they get to a certain point, and material cost, like we call nails and 2x4s, you know what I'm saying, to build houses. And so when what happens is when materials go up and when the cost to build, and it's not exactly penny for penny. So like if 1,000 square foot home is $300,000, no one's going to pay that. They'll just go build this 1,000 square foot home. It costs less. It costs the same, but you get a new home. So homes are valued at like 80% of what a new build would be, kind of, sort of. If you 80 or 90%, if you can kind of think about that kind of math, you're never going to get the same return on a used home as you will on a new home. Obviously, they're always going to. That kind of was what sets the market, but it shifts a little and changes. And there are times when you could buy a new home and the market moves so fast that you could sell it and it's just an incredibly amount of money. But generally, if you buy a new home, you're not going to get back what you put into it right away. It's at the top of where the market sits because it's a new home, and that's kind of the basis of how we build houses. If it gets so expensive to buy a home, then builders show up with their money and their investments go somewhere else, and they start building and developing, so that takes a cushion back off the market the other way. So we didn't really get into that too much, and hopefully I can do some more of these. But honestly, I have to think about this kind of stuff for like 2 or 3 weeks sometimes, and like think about what my place is in this industry and how I want to convey this information before I put it out there. Because I mean, I am equally as responsible as anyone else who's predicting and trying to forecast. And I hope that other than I'm telling you we're in a downward trend, I don't even think I need to forecast that. I mean, summer's over and winter's coming. The leaves are falling. And so it's a good thing, and I'm not telling you it's negative. It's a thing that has to happen on our economy, and I hope everyone prepared themselves for being able to hang out. You're not going to go to buy a bunch of Cheetos and go to the movies like you did before. You're going to have to hang out with your kids at the park and do stuff that's not expensive, and Disneyland's going to suffer for a few years. Not even a few years. Probably by like, oh, here I go. See, it's that simple. You just go, oh yeah, you know so much. I don't. I would hope by next spring that we're seeing like this thing start to go a little bit more towards this curve, but who knows, I'm in it for the long haul because I'm a U.S. citizen, and I've spent a few bucks and I've saved a few bucks, and I don't like being poor any more than I can afford to be rich, if you know what I mean. And so I'm kind of just this guy in the middle that believes in that weight being held there, and I wish I had more money, but I don't think I wouldn't be doing it with this and all that. So I hope that did something for everyone, and whatever. Good night. Thank you. Again, my name is Ron Felton with Aurea Realty, but you already know that if you're watching this, so piss off.